A very good evening. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to thank our esteemed professor, Dr. J.S. Rohan Savarimuttu, Senior Lecturer in English at the Department of Languages and Communication Studies, Faculty of Communication and Business Studies. So, Trincomalee Campus, Eastern University, Sri Lanka. Sir, I am deeply grateful for your guidance and support, which made this interview possible. So your encouragement and mentorship have been invaluable throughout this journey. So thank you so much for helping me create this wonderful opportunity, sir. So now it is an absolute privilege to introduce an extraordinary personality, Yasmin Azad, born and raised in Sri Lanka. She pursued her higher education at the University of Peradeniya. After moving to the United States, she completed her master's in counseling and dedicated her career to serving as a mental health counselor, making a meaningful impact on many lives. Today, Yasmin Azad resides in the United States, but her roots and experiences from Sri Lanka remain deeply woven into her work. So she is the brilliant author of Stay Daughter, a memoir that has touched hearts and sparked meaningful conversations across the world. So it is truly an honor to welcome the remarkable author, Yasmin Azad, whose journey and voice continue to inspire countless individuals. Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us today. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening to you too. And I'm honored to be here with you today. And thank you for the book and for this in Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's begin our conversation, ma'am, by discussing the title, Stay Daughter.
So, there's a verse in the Quran that says, and it's in the epigraph, like in the it's like an epigraph in the first chapter. Stay in your homes and do not display yourselves. And I'm sure that there are different meanings, like anything, like any word, any sentence in a book, it can be interpreted differently. But I know that there are many people, communities that have interpreted that statement as women should be in their homes. They should spend their time in their homes and not outside their homes. Even today, there are Muslim communities that interpret that sentence, that statement. And I think for me, the word stay doesn't only mean physically stay in your home, but it's also saying stay within the traditions, stay within the customs, don't go away. And when you send children or girls or anyone, child, out of your home to a school, which is essentially a secular institution, you are not making them stay, you are allowing them to go out. And what the community, I think, was saying when we went out, my mother went to school for like maybe grade 3, is saying, well, even if we send you out into the world, we want you to stay with us, stay in the tradition. And I think my book tries to explore, can that be done? Can you actually expose children to different customs and cultures and also expect them to be no different than if they had never left the house? And I think most of the time it can't. You are taking a risk that people will move away from the customs and the traditions. And I think that's what's happened in Sri Lanka. So that's, I felt like the title is telling my basic concern or passion or theme or whatever you call it is, can you stay?
Ma'am, as a reader or a researcher, to me, the title reflects both an emotional bond and a sense of
Mm-hmm.
expectation. A father's
Mm-hmm.
trust and a daughter's conflict between tradition and individuality. So, can you comment on the
Mm-hmm.
title in this way, ma'am?
Yeah, yes, because so when people, or I think most people from traditional communities or any community venture out, they can't move away from where they from the family community that they were raised in, right? So there's a phrase in Sri Lanka, I mean in the United States, which you can also something like this. So if somebody was born, say, in New York, and then they move to California, they might say something like, well, uh, they may have, they may have moved to California, but they're still a New Yorker. You can never get rid of that part of you that was raised in New York. So, and, and it's not like traditional communities are all oppressive and have nothing to offer. They have a lot to offer, especially as I mentioned, if you live in the West, you appreciate what traditional communities offer even more because you realize the sense of belonging, the helping, people helping each other, being there for each other. That's very strong. And I think it's strongest, I would say, in the Muslim community in Sri Lanka. There's a sort of, I have friends in Sri Lanka who are doctor friends, and there's this joke among them. Like if you go to a nursing home and the patient's room is full of people, you can bet that's a Muslim patient. Don't you think that's true? Because we turn up for people.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's not something I take, I dismiss. Muslims are very community oriented. We stick, we are there for each other. So I always, even today, I feel I raised 3 children in the United States, and I always missed when I wish I had the community to give them that I had when I was back. So yes. So even with my father, I didn't, and I don't in the book, I hope, say, oh, the community is all full of oppression. No, it's not. There's a lot of wonderful things. So you're right that I had that, whether how much to stay and how much to go.
So, when you explain this, ma'am, I can remember
Mm-hmm.
a verse in Tamil. So, it's
Mm-hmm.
Karayamal Kalandu வாழ்தல்.
Mm-hmm. Karayamal.
Karayamal Kalandu வாழ்தல்.
What exactly would that mean?
It means, ma'am, if we mingling with other cultures,
Yes.
we have to mingle with them, but
Yeah.
without rejecting our traditions, norms, likewise.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. Though I have, but we know it's not easy.
Yes, ma'am, it's not
Depends
easy.
on how much yeah, it's not easy.
Yes, ma'am.
It's, yeah, for instance, one of the unfortunate things that have happened is I hear that the divorce rate among Muslims has just skyrocketed.
Yes, ma'am.
That's an unfortunate outcome of change.
Change.
When I was growing up, maybe I knew 2 people who were divorced, really, 2 relatives who were divorced. Now, every time I look around, somebody's divorced. Is that true for you in your communities too?
Yes, ma'am. It has increased.
Yes, yeah. So, so you have these unfortunate changes too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
well, so
Mhm.
uh, what is the significance of the comma in the title, ma'am? What are you trying to stress by using this punctuation marker in the title? Because since usually titles do not have punctuation markers. So, ma'am,
Right. Yes. Well, actually, because otherwise I think it won't make sense. What does stay daughter mean? It's like making like stay. It's a command. It's a request, daughter. Yes.
so that
Yeah.
comma make your title difference when we compare
Yes.
other
Yes.
titles of novels. Yes, ma'am.
Right. Yes. It's a request. Maybe sometimes even a command.
So, ma'am, does stay daughter reveal the bond
Mhm.
between a father and a daughter? Does it
Yes.
rest on Sigmund Freud's Electra complex? Can you share?
Yeah, so actually what I was focusing on there is I had a particular, so when when West people in the West look at uh, traditional societies like Islamic societies, one of the stereotypes they have is that Muslim men are all oppressive, that they are, that they're very strong patriarchs that control their women, won't let them move. And I wanted to refute that stereotype. What I wanted to say is that family love is universal, and that as strong as traditions and customs are, fathers sometimes love their children enough to put their children above when the need arises, to put their children's needs or their children's well-being or their children's happiness above tradition even. And uh, one of the responses I've got in the West, and this is actually the most common response I've got. He says, "Your father was so loving. Your father is so different from what I imagined, a Muslim father to be." And I'm so glad that that happened, because one of the main things is I want to say, don't just stereotype all Muslim men as these terribly oppressive, patriarchal, human beings who only care to maintain we are all human, all families have love. And love is actually, I think, what allows um, change to happen, because sometimes a father would say, you know, this my child wants this so much, I'm going to get it even if it goes against the community. Um, and I think, I don't know, you may have experiences like that in your families too, where a parent stands up for a child. So, yeah.
Ma'am, does stay daughter project the
Mhm.
male dominance by justifying the rights of a father on his beloved daughter? Or are you trying to bring out the positive element of trust the father has on his daughter?
I'm trying mostly, I'm trying seeing him as a human being, because he has his own cultural, like he was brought up, as I show in the book. His mom never went to school. His sister never went to school. They never stepped out of their homes in the daylight. Only my grandmother is supposed she would sometimes, because my father was at work. My grandmother, it is said, when she had to go out, would lock the doors front and back and tell her daughter to be alone. She would wear the black, the complete hijab, and quickly go somewhere, get whatever she want and come in. So for my father, when his daughter turned up and said, I really like to go to university, his jaw dropped. What? What's this? But in the end, I think he saw how unhappy I was, and it was he thought, he said, I think I will let you go. I mean, at first he said, you go if you want, I won't stop you. But very after that, he came around. But I think, again, as I said before, it's complex. It's family love, and I think personality types, and whatever he came through.
So eventually, father understood that your decision was
Yeah,
correct. Yes, ma'am.
yeah.
So, ma'am, uh, so when combining the above questions I have asked just now, so don't you think
Mm-hmm.
that you are justifying male dominance, ma'am? So can you comment on this, ma'am?
Um, I'm not, no, I'm trying to understand how male and female, whether you're male or female, work within families and cultures, and they too have been conditioned, right? Like you did the psychology part. Everybody's conditioned by the environment in which and they are struggling too. It's not like they get up one morning and say, okay, this is the person I'm going to be. You are already formed by that time. And what I'm trying to portray is that even how complex and hard sometimes the situation is for anyone, when a child turns up and says, you know, I want something different. For instance, like if you have a Muslim family where a child is gay and they come and tell the parents, this is who I am, it's going to be very hard. And I understand, I still think they should absolutely accept their child, but I also understand why it would be so difficult for them. And in those cases too, sometimes it's family love that will triumph. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. So it's not, I think the culture can be, culture, I think, definitely promotes male dominance. But what I'm saying is a culture is not a monolithic sort of piece that never has a crack in it. Sometimes the cracks that let the light in, the difference in, is a parent's love or for the well-being of the child. And they say, okay, I mean, if my child is gay, I'm going to stand by that child. I love him or her too much to I don't care about it. And then once one parent does that, other people also then get an idea, maybe that's okay. Like maybe it's okay to, you know, I don't know, to, go away to university, whatever. So I tried from the very beginning not to make it like a very sort of a binary, the culture is all bad, males are all bad, opposed to everybody else who's the victim. And I feel like, no, it's a much more complex interaction between all these forces.
So, yes, madam, you have given a very clear and insightful perspective on the title, Stay Daughter. So, your explanation has provided valuable clarity and has given a deeper understanding of the thought process behind your work, ma'am. So, ma'am, your memoir, Stay Daughter, beautifully reflects your connection to your roots in Sri Lanka, even after relocating to an alien soil like the United States. So,
Mhm,
working as a psychiatric counselor, ma'am, in a foreign
mhm,
land must have
mhm,
provided unique insights and reflections on your past. So,
mhm,
with this in my mind, so I'd like to ask, did your life
mhm,
alien soil as a psychiatric counselor prompt you to look back on your
mhm,
past and write on your past as a psychological exercise, more or less similar to a diary writing?
mhm. Um, Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So once you work here, or even if you look around, but certainly if you work in the mental health field, one of the first things that strikes you is how alone people are, how many people there are in the United States who really don't have family or community to to support them. And one of the things that any mental health counselor knows is that more family support you have, the better the outcome is for mental health issues. That isolation is one of the worst things for mental health issues. So actually, that's what made me look back on my community. And, like, for instance, I'll give you an example. There was an older woman who was who was one of my clients, and we needed her to um, move to a nursing home, what's called a nursing home, like a aged care home, old age home. And we needed some information about her birth and all that so that we could paperwork ready. See, she has lived in this community for like 30 or 40 years. We couldn't find a single human being who knew anything about her past. Not one human being knew where she might have been born. And I said to myself, wow, that would never happen in my community. Even if, somebody would know who their father was. You never have that kind of isolation. And I saw more and more of that kind of isolation, more and more of, and it's a well-known thing, for instance, that people commit more, people who are isolated are more likely to commit suicide than those who are not. So that was when I had to humbly say that, really to appreciate the Muslim community I grew up, which, by the way, even in Sri Lanka, which has unfortunately a relatively high suicide rate, the Muslims have the least. The Muslims have, they don't, we don't have the kind of suicide that you see in other communities. And that's because the community and family hold together. And you can see even in my story, my father thought of his nieces as almost his children, there's no question. That's, um, and speaking of, we have these phrases. So for the cousins, my aunts and all, she said, what do you say? Ondutta poravi. This
Yes.
is one step away from a sibling.
Yes.
That's who the cousin is, that's how we look at, that's how we relate to them. Uh, yeah, we say on Duttaporavi, like just one step away. So that's a very precious thing. And so that's, if I had the time and the energy, I would write a whole paper on isolation in community and its mental health impact, as opposed to what it is in like in Muslim communities. So yes, that definitely my experience in the mental health issue is what made me look at the Muslim community and see what was also there is oppression, there's no question. There's oppression in all ways, in all communities, but there's also some things very good.
So, ma'am, would you treat your novel Stay Daughter as a memoir or an autobiography or a form of diary writing? So, what is your opinion, ma'am?
I would think of it not as an autobiography because I really don't actually, the memoir itself I wrote because I felt like it would have more impact if I said this is something that really happened instead of writing, a fiction. What I really think, it's a memoir, but not just of a single human being's life. I'm trying to represent what happened to a whole community between the years of like 74, when my great grandaunt first went to school. She was the first Muslim girl to go to school, I believe, even in the country, because at that time there were no schools, uh, and then like in the beginning in the 1960s, late, when Muslim girls slowly started to go to the university. So there's a big, so it's about 100 years, shall we say. There's a huge change took place. And I wanted the book to sort of represent that, to capture that moment when these things were happening. So I think I would say it's a memoir, but I would like to call it a memoir of a community, not just a person.
Great. Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, did your work as a psychiatric counselor motivate you to write this novel? And did the psychological theories influence your writing? In a way, are there events that you have suppressed in your writings since Occidental psychological theories might read it against your intentions of writing a novel?
So one of the things about writing a memoir, especially I think for people like us, Muslim community traditional, is I wanted to be truthful, but not in a way that might harm people, especially not I wasn't like saying, oh, anything I want anyway. So there were things that I wanted, to write it in a way that was not, what shall I say, not expose anyone as being a bad person, especially, my cousin who eloped. But on the other hand, to be truth without being at least somewhat authentic, the memoir would not have had any impact. If I wrote a book where everybody was wonderful and there was, like me including, and nothing was wrong in the community, so everything is wonderful, who would want to read it? They'd know at once this isn't true. So all along, the psychological balance that I try to is let me speak, let me be honest and authentic without being callous about how this is going to impact people, the people in the book and even the larger community. I'm not sure that I was able to catch that balance, because I think some people sort of felt like I was being not fair or taking things out of context in terms of Islamic culture. But that's par for the course. So there's a statement in writing or in life that if you create no enemies, you create nothing. You can't do anything that pleases everyone. If you do, it's not worthwhile. You're not producing anything worthwhile. So I told myself, I will probably create enemies, but I will write the truth as much as I can. I mean, in a way that is truthful, even, and kind.
Perfect. So, next, ma'am, your memoir, so Stay Daughter, is not only a
Mhm.
personal narrative, but also a thought provoking exploration of cultural and societal themes. You already mentioned it. So,
Mhm.
through your storytelling, it feels as though you are engaging the reader in a deeper dialogue about identity, gender roles, and traditions. So,
Mhm.
with this in mind, I'd like to ask, did you use form of a novel to ideologue with the reader?
Yes, a long, I took several writing courses before I embarked on actually writing, because I felt like I needed to write it in a way that will engage the reader. And one of the um, pieces of advice I got is to make it sound like a story as much as you can. So a story is what has what's called a narrative arc, you begin somewhere, then it reaches a peak, and then it has a resolution, right? That's how even fiction is written. So you have something, I don't know if you've read Pride and Prejudice, but most people have. So you have this, where these Bennett girls need husbands. The peak is when um, one girl elopes, and their whole all their hopes are dashed because their family is ruined, and then it's resolved when somehow they arrange a marriage for that girl, and the Elizabeth Bennet, who is the protagonist, somebody is in love with her, and he proposes, and they marry. So that's the relation. So for me, the arc was, it begins with people going to school. Then when my father goes to jail, I mean, that's the time, that's the arc, that's the top of the story arc when all my hopes are dashed. And then the resolution is that in the end I was able to go. So yes, I did try to, um, shall I say, structure it as much as I could uh, as a story.
Okay. So, ma'am, what were your intentions of writing a novel?
When I
Yes, yes,
was my intention.
yes, ma'am. Yes.
The intention is, as I said, I wanted the reader to find it engaging, to want to follow, in a novel, what's basically happening is the reader wants to know, so what happened next? That's why they turn the page, right? So your grandmother, great. So then what happened? So then the community said, oh, well, you shouldn't allow them girls to go out. So then what happened? Were they allowed to go? What shall I, that pacing, which makes people want to turn the page to find out. I thought I'm going to do it that way too. They need to know, okay, so they allowed you to go to school, then what happened? Then what happened? Then what happened? So yeah, that's what I
Happen
keep
next.
the reader engaged. Yes. They want to know what happened next year.
So they will have a curiosity about it.
Yes, yes.
So exactly.
Right. Because without curiosity, the reader will drop the book.
Yes.
So I'm not interested. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, ma'am. So, ma'am, if we talk about this identity, so what are
Mhm.
your views on the identity crisis projected by Stay Daughter?
So for me, actually, it was a huge identity crisis because I'm no longer a traditional Muslim, because I've been exposed to too many books and ideas that make it impossible for me to be that. And then you understand. And the thing with Islamic community is that you really have to be a believer to belong. There's no sort of like if you think of Buddhism or something, you have a whole spectrum. They don't care about Islamic. So I think, but there's no going that you can't. There's no going back. So I said, well, things will have to fall in place as they do, because you can't pretend to be somebody you are not. But it was all in a way, the Stay Daughter is, what shall I say? There's a sort of a irony there because I didn't stay in the end. I have stayed certain things, but I have walked away too. And I think that happens often. That's so the identity crisis that began when I was like a late teenager, it sort of evolved more and more until it became a different identity. Yeah.
So, how did your understanding of your identity
Mhm.
change when you moved away from Sri Lanka?
So when you move away from Sri Lanka, especially to a Western country, right? Especially if you're a Muslim in
Yeah.
Sri Lanka, one of the things you see in yourself and even in others that a more individualistic approach to life begins to take over the more communal approach to life. Muslims especially, we live in extended families, we help each other a lot, we make sacrifices for families. That is still there somewhat, but not to the extent that they are in Sri Lanka. Things change here. And I think that's, and in fact, my writing the book, probably I doubt that I would have written it if I was in Sri Lanka. I doubt it. I think I would not have sort of had the courage to say, this is how I think about these things. So definitely, and I see that even in other people, other women, um, who make choices that their parents won't approve of or whatever. So that's, the Western culture is a highly individualistic culture where people are constantly told to become independent and go do your own thing and, this and that. And Muslim culture is a very community-oriented culture. And then you begin, I doubt that too many people move to the West without at least changing a little bit in terms of identity. Certainly, their children must change. So, so I would say my identity changed that I became hmm, less constrained, by community norms. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so, ma'am, there is a theory by Vygotsky, so known as the socio-cultural theory of cognitive development. So, it
Mm-hmm.
emphasizes the significance of social interaction in a child's cognitive growth. So, where learning occurs through engagement with more knowledgeable individuals, such as parents or teachers. So, ma'am, do you think that Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory of cognitive development
Mm-hmm.
enhances the understanding of the messages projected by the memoir Stay Daughter?
Oh, yes, definitely, So I think, and thank you for bringing it up. So, so much of what we learn as children, as the theory says, some of it is inborn. We have things we can learn by myself. Most of it is what the environment exposes us to. And when that exposure changes, our learning. So when I think of my grandmother, who could barely count, and that's not because she didn't have the ability, but she wasn't given the opportunity, right? So, and as a child, so yeah, go to school, play with different children who from different cultures. What you learn is going to be different, for sure.
So, so next, ma'am, Stay Daughter explores the
Mm-hmm.
conflict between tradition and modernity. So, with
Mm-hmm.
Western education playing a key role in shaping the tensions in
Mm-hmm.
Sri Lankan
Mm-hmm.
Muslim society. So, the
Mm-hmm.
generational and cultural conflicts add depth
Mm-hmm.
to your narrative. So, with that in mind, I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
ask your thoughts on the following conflicts portrayed in your memoir. So, ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that the theories of Huntington can be employed in analyzing Stay Daughter? So, can
Mm-hmm.
you elaborate with examples, ma'am?
Oh, yes, just the idea, um, I, well, it began with women leaving uh, their homes to go to school, right? What happened when you go to school is you are slightly exposed to an environment in which you see men, for instance, that you would not have seen if you were not out there in school. And what happens, as I say, describe in my book, is not suddenly, but little by little, the girls in the community were choosing either to elope with men from outside that their parents had not chosen for them, or refusing sometimes to marry the men that were chosen for. This never happened before, as far as I know. This never happened before. Here's a cultural clash. So there's a cultural clash of the West where women, so there's a tradition in women go out and they choose their husbands, their spouses, right? And there's a tradition where women stay and their parents completely choose them. So there's the clash, and it broke people's hearts when, the parents' hearts that when my cousin on both sides actually eloped, it just devastated the family. Then there's the clash that happens because of divorce. Women never initiated divorce when I was growing up. Now I hear that it's common that divorce rate has just skyrocketed. That's a clash of um, and that's partly also because women have become economically independent. Women working outside the home and becoming economically independent is very much a part of Western culture that has influenced Eastern culture. That's, Muslim women never went out of the homes to, unless they were like domestic help or something. That's a different thing. And when women become economically independent, they have choices which they never did before. And some of them used to divorce their husbands and walk away. So you get that clash. That's a very strong example of what of clash impacted our community.
So, ma'am, what are your views on the conflicts projected by the stay daughter, ma'am?
So my view has always been that there may be perhaps a happy medium, happy middle that we can reach, that a what shall I say, a community that's totally individualistic doesn't work because, as I said, I saw it in my mental health work. When women and when people are that isolated, it's not the best place for anyone to grow up. For children, no one. On the other hand, when nobody is given the freedom to do anything, as it used, women are not given freedom to do anything besides, getting married and having children, that's not a good place to be either. I really don't know if that a kind of a happy medium can be achieved, but if it could, that's what I would like. Not to take the good parts of both cultures and see if there can be a happy mingling of the good parts.
So, ma'am, how do you reflect on the generational conflicts portrayed in the memoir?
The intergenerational.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, you know, it what happened was that it was so gradual that I don't think that it caused a massive disruption, right? In terms of education and things. As I said, the one disruption it caused, and it still does to some extent, is the question of marriage and how so when a Muslim girl chooses to marry somebody from outside the community, that there's a huge intergenerational conflict there because no parent wants their daughter to do that. It causes heartbreak. Uh, and I think even a Muslim man, they just don't want that happen. So I think it's in that area that most of the conflict is taking place. Two things: who you marry, and then whether you're going to divorce. Those are two things that are really causing generational conflict, as far as I know. Because though I'm in contact with everybody in Sri Lanka, I can see that it's causing huge.
So, madam, uh,
Mhm,
so compared to your childhood in Sri Lanka, everything seems to have changed significantly, isn't it, ma'am?
mhm,
So
mhm,
today we see Muslim women actively participating in education, various
mhm,
professions, and even politics, ma'am. So
mhm.
how do you perceive the role of Muslim women evolving in modern Sri Lanka compared to your experiences growing up? So, do you believe the changes are impactful enough to break long standing barriers, or do you feel there is still progress to be made? So, ma'am, your perspective would offer valuable insight into how societal expectations and opportunities for Muslim women have transformed over the years.
Um, I think that, whatever changes will happen is going to happen slowly. I don't see any sort of dramatic changes happening, like in a short time, and a great change, sweeping across the community. So as you said, the literacy rate, the rates of higher education, all that has um, has happened in. And one of the interesting things that I realize that has happened is because I'm in touch, I have nieces and nephews. When people make marriage proposals now, or when they're considering a girl as a suitable bride, they're no longer asking, can she sew well? Can she cook well? They are asking, what is her education? What does she do? Now, this is a huge change, especially if you were in my generation, you would know. Nobody asked in my generation if what the education, whether she went to university. That's at least in the urban areas that I know of. I don't know about not in the rural areas. That has become a question. Would you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Even in your yes.
Yes, yes,
So
of
when
course.
that, so I'll tell you, so when that becomes a question, then families are more inclined to educate their girls, because they must feel if we don't educate her, if we don't let her do some, higher studies, nobody would want her. I mean, no person of similar status would want her for a bride. And I think that's, with my background in psychology, that's a very interesting change, very, very interesting change in So I think that is actually having an impact on, now I have my cousins' daughters who would never have thought, I would not think, but they would go to university, but they are, because now the expectation is that girls will go to university. Or do some accounting, or some studies beyond high school. Um, so I think it's doing two things. It's encouraging the education of women, giving them the opportunities to become economically independent. And I don't know what the future will hold, but definitely that change is taking place.
Exactly, ma'am. So, I wanted to ask an important question, ma'am, that has confused me for a long time. So,
Mhm,
Muslims have a rich culture and
mhm,
they follow Islam. So,
mhm,
however, I often sense a clash between Islam and the cultural practices of Muslims.
mhm,
For example, ma'am, Islam
mhm,
encourages and even emphasizes education for women, so
mhm,
showing a clear path for them to pursue knowledge.
mhm,
However, some cultural practices among Muslims seem to
mhm,
restrict women,
mhm.
believing that after puberty they must stay confined to their homes and not seek education. The
Right.
you explained in your memoir, ma'am.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
this creates a contradiction where Islam advocates one thing, and
mhm,
but certain cultural tradition and enforce something else. This confusion arises because those who believe in Islam and those who
mhm,
follow such cultural practices both identity as Muslims.
mhm,
Okay, ma'am. So, yet their actions and beliefs can sometimes diverge. I hope
mhm.
you understand my point, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
What is your opinion or perspective on the relationship between religion and culture? So, how do you think these differences impact the lives of Muslim women, particularly in traditional societies, ma'am?
So whatever the religion is, I don't think there's communities that practice. It's not just only Muslims, right? Islam, it means Christianity, Judaism, whatever. Communities don't practice the religions that the way it should.
Yes.
The culture seems to pick and choose, what they think is good for them, and what they feel is, gives them protection. And those are the things that are also, and for some reason, the whole idea of confining women is, for if you look at what the Taliban is doing in Afghanistan, not even allowing girls to go to school, and they're supposed to be that Islamic. Where is it said, I think it's human beings make choices about what benefits them rather than what is good for the whole community. And there's so many ways in which Islamic culture, Christian culture, I mean, goes against, for instance, in Christianity or even in Islam, that, that all human beings are equal in the eyes of God. That's not how they've treated all human beings. They always thought certain human beings are better than others. And you can, enslave certain people, right? It went on for centuries. So I think that's just human nature, that we take from culture and religion what is comfortable for us. And for instance, I'll give you one of the worst things I used to see when I was young. There was a custom of taking abandoned children, so-called adoption, but they were basically unpaid servants in the house. Now, you were supposed to treat orphans very kindly in Islam. It's said so. Who treated them kindly? 90% of the time they were treated like servants. I don't know if you knew anybody like that, but I knew quite a few children like that. So there you go again, because it's convenient for them to do that, free domestic help. Yes. So I think that's just part of human nature, to not follow parts of the religion or any religion that's not convenient for them.
So, ma'am, can we say, the cultural practices built not according to the religion? So there are some differences. Can we say like that?
Oh yeah, many, many differences, I think, right? That um, we'll take a very simple thing.
Okay.
The Prophet is supposed to have said, you can do many things and be a Muslim. You can't lie and be a Muslim, right?
Exactly.
How many Muslims do you think lead their lives without lying?
No one,
But
yeah. Yes.
exactly. I mean, I don't know if you have heard that phrase, but my mother used to say that. She says, you can do a lot of things and still be a Muslim, but you cannot lie and be a Muslim. And we would laugh. Yeah, then nobody is a Muslim. It's not just that sometimes people, once in a while they lie. They're not keeping that in mind, that this is something that I shouldn't do, So
So I think, ma'am, you have given a very clear explanation. Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, did you receive support or criticism from your community after publishing the memoirs, Stay Daughter?
So I would say I received both. Strangely enough, it was women in my mother's generation, a few of them who could read, who really liked the book, because I think they were able to sort of support, yeah, this one. But among my generation, there were those who liked the book, but I think there were quite a few, and there still are, who felt that I had I had misinterpreted or misconstrued or Islam, and that I had taken things out of context, and that I had described things which really are part of the culture and not a part of the religion. And I think they were afraid that I had criticized the religion. But as I said, earlier, you can't, if you don't who makes no enemies makes nothing. So I thought, okay, well, that's it.
So whatever we do, there will be a criticism, no, ma'am.
Course. And if there is no criticism, then you haven't done anything much,
Yes.
because it means you haven't written anything significant. Yes. Or
Okay.
done anything
So,
significant, yeah.
So, ma'am, in your memoir, you have given a significant role for father and mother. How significant was your mother's role in shaping your identity as a young woman?
Mm. I think basically what happened is because I went to Western school and my mother's family, was far more westernized than my father's family. My basic identification was with my mother's family. Her relatives tend to be a little bit more free thinkers, and so we definitely identified with that. Um, right. I think my relationship with my father was that, it's a very loving relationship, but I knew that he held the cards, if he said, no, I'm not going to support, how in university in Sri Lanka, if you don't have financial support, you can't go. It's not like you can get a loan. I mean, you can get a slight loan, I think, but there's no way that a Muslim girl is going to get a loan and go off and live it's not going to happen. So that was partly, I was, the relationship I had was fortunately one that finally allowed him to come around.
So, ma'am, can you discuss your father's influence on your education and independence?
Father was in some ways, though he was a traditional Muslim, he was also a free thinker. He used to have a lot of contempt for these holy men who come from India and Saudi Arabia and say that, they are the descendants of the prophets, and everybody, goes and kisses their hands. And, I don't know if you have that, in your community, but we used to have, some sheikh, somebody.
I
He
have
said, what nonsense is this? There's nothing in the religion that says you have to do this, and there's nothing more holy about them than us. So he was a rebel in that way. So I think in a certain, and he would refuse, to go anywhere near that because they would be hosted for dinners, and so, there's nothing in the religion that says you need to venerate other human beings. I mean, so he was a rebel in that way, and I think that had an influence on me. And we had outside the fort, we had a tree. I think I put it in my book too. It's called the Pachagaha. Pacha means fibbing. Where men, people would stand under the tree and sell or medicinal oil and this and that. And he would say they're all rubbish, all lies, So he never took to these lies. And so I think even though he was traditional, he kind of rebelled against some nonsense, and that impacted us. He never had these big mauluds and all that in the house. We never had any of those, and especially we never had any sheikh coming and, we give a big lunch and all this. Do you have sheikhs coming to your communities?
no, ma'am, no. But I
I
have
mean,
heard
maybe,
about them, but we have no.
yeah, you're right. I think it's probably then a Western coastal thing. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Mm. So, ma'am, what advice would you give to young women navigating similar cultural and societal pressures?
So thank you for asking that question, because what I would say is, yes, you need, get the best education you can, become socially, become economically independent, but don't throw away the good the root or in your roots. Do it without sort of becoming totally individualistic. There's a lot that is positive in traditional societies, and I hope you're able to kind of capture a place where you don't, you are able to sort of be who, do your education and whatever else you want to do, but also hold on to those good principles that you may have been raised with, about the importance of connection and community.
So, how do you think, ma'am, language, it means English versus native languages, plays a role in identity formation?
Absolutely, language, uh, the vocabulary expresses what's important or significant to a community or culture. If it's not important, then it won't have a word for it, right? So one of the things, so as I said, privacy, individualism, even the word don't don't know that when I was growing up, anyone looked at something that I wrote and said, "Oh, that's creative." That idea is not there, that you go out and you write things or do things for yourself, right? And on the other hand, and I think what I showed in my book is, so in the West, family relationships are not as in the East, right? They're not, which is why they don't have words. For instance, an uncle, that's the generic word for uncle. Whereas we are telling these relationships are different and they are important, in Sinhalese, the word for Shachi is Punchiamma, which is little mother. So the child is being told, this is your second mother, no?
Yes.
But there's no word like that in English.
Mm.
No word, and even our cousins, we have my and my want to make difference between people. If you're constantly telling the child these, we don't have those. So yes, in so many ways, I did language for my first degree, and that's something that always fascinated me. Why does this language have this word for this thing and the other language doesn't? Why is there no such word? So yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. So, ma'am, in a previous interview, you mentioned that you're working on a novel with a theme you have contemplated for a long time. Who gets
Mm-hmm,
place at the table? Who are the people society accepts? And whom do they reject?
mm-hmm,
So, this
mm-hmm,
thought-provoking concept touches on profound social dynamics and inclusion. So,
mm-hmm.
could you please share more about this upcoming work and your future plans in English literature? So, what themes or issues do you hope to explore further? And how do you envision your journey as a writer evolving? So, ma'am?
So my journey of, the one thing that I always wanted to write was this memoir to capture, as I said, what happened in the community at a certain um, time in the country. When society, any society actually, you quickly realize as a child that there are more important people and less important people. For instance, if you have domestic help in the house, they're definitely not as important as relatives who comes to the house. And I can't know that you can get rid of all that, but I think there are uh, people, for instance, because the cars, or because they don't have adapted or they don't have money, that they're not treated as though they're the equal of other people. And so I'm right. That's my other thing that I've always wanted to write, and that's what I'm doing.
So,
As I said, who gets a place at the table? So, just need to make this. Yeah, you
it's
have some
interesting,
questions?
and we
Yeah.
are waiting for your work, ma'am. So,
Thank you.
ma'am, beyond your memoir, Stay Daughter, so I would like to ask some more questions. So,
Mhm.
ma'am, what
Mhm.
are your views on the present move in reducing the age of marriage for a girl in Iran? So from 9 to 13. So do you accept this, or are you of the view that Quran is being misinterpreted at the present times? So what is your opinion, ma'am?
Oh, I think my opinion is that women should not marry until they are adults. Absolutely. There's also a physical reason for this, and I think other women who become who become pregnant when they are very young, they tend to develop certain gynecological conditions. One is called, I think, a fistula. There's terrible situations where women, young girls have been asked to give birth for many reasons. Marriage is for adults, and only adults should marry. That's definitely my view.
Thank you, ma'am, for that. So, so ma'am, uh, can you elaborate on the dress code of Muslim women between Sri Lanka and a country like USA? I think you can compare.
Most of the Muslim women in America are like you. They'll just wear the headscarf.
Yes,
I very rarely see a full hijab, like the jilbab, I call it.
yes, ma'am.
So most Muslim women tend to, be dressed modestly
Modern.
and cover their heads. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, ma'am, being a diaspora writer, do
Mhm.
you yearn to come back to Sri Lanka to relive your childhood reminiscence?
Particularly, I think. I love visiting the golf fort but I don't think I would want to live there anymore because, things have changed. Actually, the Muslim community is now almost all gone from the golf fort. It has become a very touristy. Yeah, no, not particularly.
So thank you
Yeah.
so much, ma'am. So for dedicating your valuable time to this interview, it has truly been an honor to speak with you and learn from your insights. You have shared so many profound thoughts and experiences. This interview has been incredibly meaningful, and I deeply appreciate your openness and willingness to engage with my questions. So, your words will be a guiding light for many who seek to understand the themes of stay, daughter, and beyond. So, ma'am, I hope we can connect again in in the future for another conversation, ma'am, as I am sure there will always be more to learn from you. So, thank you once again, ma'am, for this wonderful opportunity. Until next time, take care and wishing you all the best, ma'am.
Thank you.